sometimes we're not talking ahead of time.
Do whatever you like.
Do it the way you do it, man.
It's your show.
This is not my show. This is the people's show. I don't want to give them that power. Once you give it over to the people, it's all over from there. God. Hey, you know what's really cool? Writing a movie that's supposed to be Blade Runner, theoretically Blade Runner, but instead of it being robots, it's a demon
with a motorcycle visor.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. It's a cool design. You know who he looks like? He looks like Judge Death from Judge Dredd, from the comic books.
I've
never done Judge
Venom.
Death. Oh, yeah, that's
because of the teeth.
Oh, that's true. That's true. So on this episode of the Culture Cast, I am your host, Chris Dashew, and I'm joined once again by my good friend all the way from the Wake Up Heavy podcast, where he's a weird dad talking about weird movies with his friends. Your friend and mine, Mr. Mark Begley.
I live on anxiety, coffee, and chocolate.
Yeah, boy. So yeah, we'll be delving into...
That's not his line, but I made it his line.
Right. It's like, Luke, I am your father. He never actually says that. Who cares? So yeah, on this episode of the Culture Cast, we're still firmly in Rutger Hauer month, and we're talking about a little Rutger Hauer film that you may have never seen, but we're going to be talking about whether or not you should check it out. It's called Split Second.
I unloaded a full clip, 450 Magnum, point blank. It disappeared.
He can hear its heartbeat.
Where did he go?
He knows it's out there.
Somebody must have seen something.
He knows what it can do.
Are you telling me there's something running around loose in this city, ripping the hearts out of people and eating them?
Maybe he eats them for breakfast.
Now it's really pissing him off.
Foster!
And his new partner
I work alone.
makes two.
Paranoid people with guns are a menace to society.
You'd be paranoid too if you had a dipshit like this following you.
I've got nonos and serial homicide.
Oh, terrific.
It has no motive.
The only thing we know for sure is that he's not a vegetarian.
It has the DNA structure of all its victims.
It gives no warning.
You ready to die?
But one thing's for certain.
We gotta get bigger guns.
It ain't no pushover.
2, yeah. Bingo.
We want to get to Cannon Street.
No, you don't.
Yes, we do.
Boy, are you pushy.
I wouldn't say this thing thinks it's Satan. I'd say it is Satan.
Rat bastard! Satan is a deep shit. Get out of there! 5 seconds! Okay, 4, 3, 2.
Rutger Hauer. Split Second.
Nice timing.
Split Second.
So the film is directed by Tony Maylam with a special directing credit to Ian Sharp for the final subway scene. We'll talk about whether or not that is a directing thing worth having. The film is written by Gary Scott Thompson, and it stars Mr. Rutger Hauer, Kim Cattrall, and Neil Duncan, with a couple other people thrown in. Pete Postlethwaite, Michael J. Pollard. We'll talk about the cast. But it is essentially Blade Runner with Rutger Hauer chasing after a big monster. I mean, It's like a buddy. I mean, Blade Runner's not a buddy cop movie, but this is like a buddy cop movie set in a Blade Runner world.
Yeah. I forgot that I had watched this. I don't remember when you were asking for guests for the Rutger Hauer shows if I picked this because I had watched it or if I picked it because I thought I hadn't watched it and it sounded interesting. I'm kind of feeling now like I made a mistake and I should have picked one of the ones that I actually hadn't seen before. Only because when I went and looked on Letterboxd to confirm whether I had seen it or not, realizing I had seen it and that my rating was fairly low.
Oh, boy.
And then realizing while I was watching it that I didn't remember a whole bunch, which generally means I was tuned out while watching the movie, which is not a very good sign. But I stayed focused on it this time. Although I did lose track at one point because I got very confused, and maybe you can clear this up for me. But yeah, it's sort of interesting. I think it's one of those movies, and I'm just speculating here. I feel like this is a movie that probably got heavy airplay on cable TV in the mid 90s, and a lot of kids, that were in their early teens, late teens, caught it a whole bunch of times and probably really liked it because of the Rutger Hauer connection, because it is sci-fi and dreary and there's boobies in it and there's a considerable amount of gore and the action is sort of fun, and probably thinking, oh, this is much better than it actually is, because it's really not a very good movie. All things considered.
So I had never seen it, but again, Rutger Hauer, sci-fi horror. I'm here. I'm game. Like, whatever. Put whatever in front of me. The poster's pretty cool. The monster design is shown on the poster. Kind of, I think that the monster benefits from the poster more than it does from the movie. I think the monster doesn't look I think the monster never looks as cool as it looks on the poster, if that makes sense. And when you see it towards the end of the movie, you kind of realize why. But all of those early kind of impressions, again, it's a Rutger Hauer movie. The poster says Blade Runner meets Alien. He's seen the future. Now he has to kill it. He'll need bigger guns. Like, those are pretty, like, that's enticing. That's interesting. Like, I'm on board. And, we don't talk about the posters enough. And I feel like it's, especially with something like this, like, that is what these movies, especially something like this, lived and died on in fucking the 90s. Kids are going to the Blockbuster, Hollywood Video, or teenagers and adults are, and they're trying to get sold on something, and this is going to sell you if you see it. And the one of the lines on it is Blade Runner meets Alien. Yeah, I mean, it's that's a pretty close approximation. I think calling it Alien is maybe a little much. It's more like Aliens than Alien. But without, again, this movie's kind of strange because it's kind of similar to everything else this month, kind of tonally all over the place, which is fine. It's tonally inconsistent. Not every movie has to be, and not every movie is. And with movies that are tonally inconsistent, your mileage will vary. And this is 3 genres being mashed up as opposed to 2. It's a horror movie, it's a sci-fi movie, and it's an action movie. Because there are parts of this movie that don't need to exist. Like, why is there so much rainfall everywhere? Doesn't factor into anything. But
I think that's part of the Blade Runner inspiration in a way.
Right. But like
constant rain.
Right. It doesn't serve the narrative though. They're in the sewers at the end, but like.
Right. The eco horror it's not really eco horror, but the climate crisis part of it doesn't really factor into the film at all.
I didn't see any way that it did.
It adds a little bit of interest to the screen, I guess. Everything. They're not underwater, but in a lot of scenes there is a good 5 or 6 inches of water on the ground.
But then you see the establishing shots of London and it just looks normal.
Right.
And that's the problem. Like it's good if you can have the budget to make the shots show London washed out, and like they keep talking about how like large areas of London are flooded, but then it's like
underwater flooded.
Right. And it's like, but I never get the sense of that.
You don't get an underwater scene for one thing.
No.
Which
there's an underwater shot towards the end of the movie, but that's it.
If I remember correctly, and I just watched this, the title crawl or the title card mentions London being underwater. So you think that at least one scene is going to take place with either a duel or a battle or just even an escape from an underwater trap. Well, and you don't get that. You get 6 inches of water at the most.
Well, you and I have talked about it very recently with a monster that uses the sewers to get around. And that's what I thought the movie was kind of driving at, was like the creature is using the sewers to traverse the city. And that kind of makes sense. And maybe that is what's going on. And they just never say it. But that they never really mention like, that's what's going on. So
yeah, it doesn't play into it. It doesn't. There's no scene where the flooding of London has an effect on what's happening to the characters.
Yeah.
It's not a hindrance in any way, really. You get some fun shots of little hover boats that the police use. Lots of driving in 6 inches of water in their Jeeps.
Lots of walking around in water.
Lots of walking around in water running downstairs.
Can't be fun. Just looks miserable. Honestly, it looks miserable.
Foot rot. That's all I think of.
Trench foot, right?
Trench foot, yes.
Yeah. Just like the most disgusting thing imaginable, having your feet in water. Like it's like their knees down, essentially. And man, walking on water is not easy either. I mean, it's,
No, that's very true. That's very true.
Yeah, no, that's what I kept thinking when I was seeing kind of this whole idea playing out of like London being flooded and all this water. Is like, man, this must have just been a fucking nightmare to be on set. I can't get dry for like a month, like 2 or 3 months straight or whatever it is. Cause it took forever too. It took forever to do anything with this kind of stuff because it's a lot of stress when you're shooting in these kind of like less than desirable settings on purpose, intentional. That's why so much is done with CGI because you don't want to go into the goddamn jungles of, Costa Rica and do this for real. It's much easier to just do it fake. And this is this. I mean, if they made this movie today, there would be very little real water anything. It would be a lot of CGI and a lot of, like 1 or 2 scenes to kind of establish the water is real. And the movie itself kind of does that. It isn't constant throughout.
No.
So
that's why a lot of scenes, I think, take place in his apartment, take place in the police station, where the flooding isn't really affecting anything.
No. I mean, the climax of the movie takes place somewhere where the flooding affected, I guess, yes.
Should have been deeper water there, though.
Yeah.
Since they're under the water table, as they say specifically.
As they say in the movie.
when they're going down the steps.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about Rutger Hauer. So what's kind of your exposure to Rutger Hauer as an actor?
Well, it was probably I would guess it was probably first with Blade Runner. Very well could have been something like Nighthawks, though. That came out prior to Blade Runner and may have played on TV before I saw Blade Runner on video, because I certainly didn't see it in the theater. But first core memory would have to be Blade Runner. And then the next big one would be The Hitcher, because that is a movie that I watched a lot on video. One of my favorite movies, actually.
I honestly, because I've watched it and we're talking about it in 2 weeks, honest to God, that movie I'm not kidding. That movie feels like it has Mark Begley energy.
What I mean?
When I was watching, I was like, this is totally a movie that if Mark Begley's not into this movie, I'll be surprised.
It is an all-time fave. I don't know how many times we watched that. And the sucky thing is, and here for the proponents of physical media, I'm going to give you a shout out, although I don't think this has a decent release. It's getting one now. The Hitcher, that is. Still talking about that. It's been on HBO forever, but the version that they have, and I believe even the last time I tried to watch it on HBO Max, it's this weird VHS rip of the film. It's letterboxed, but it's square. It's an SD version of the movie. So I think about watching it all the time, and then I realize, I'm going to have to watch that crap on HBO if I want to watch it.
It's on my Plex server.
Yes, and I will check it out there. I was going to actually prior to this, but I figured, well, it's on there now, so I don't need to worry about it. So those of you that crow about this is why you need to buy physical media, that's one very good reason, because there has not been a decent streaming version of this ever.
Yeah, I bet it's probably easier to get the remake than it is the original.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. I mean, it's available, but it's just you're going to be watching a fucked up version of it for some reason. But this one's streaming on Prime right now and a couple other places, I believe.
Yeah, that's the other thing. It's kind of funny, obviously, with Rutger Hauer being known for something like Blade Runner. Do you know who was originally thought of for the role in this movie?
I'm going to say Harrison Ford.
Yeah. Isn't that wild? Because, is this really a movie Harrison Ford would be in?
I mean, the filmmaker is considering somebody. Doesn't necessarily mean that they were actually ever really in the running.
No, because
when you're
Rutger Hauer
writing
works way too well.
When you're writing your script, you can imagine Harrison Ford in your lead role all you want. That doesn't really mean anything.
Yeah. Because like they lean on the Blade Runner stuff really hard with the dystopian London and I mean, like what Rutger Hauer is wearing and what the guns look like. I mean, it's like painfully obvious what they're leaning on. But you know what? There are worse things to lean on. There are worse movies to use as inspiration. You know, that's, I think, what they kind of benefit from here is like there are worse things you could really use as inspiration.
And
Alien,
that isn't
Blade Runner.
Right. And those heavy leanings, we'll say, aren't really the things that bother me about this film. Part of it is the tone, like you mentioned. Again, tone can be a funny thing with me. A lot of times I like movies that take wide swings in tones and are unexpected swings. It's when a film seems to me that they can't make up their mind whether they want to be serious or goofy. And this is one of those where he's this stereotypical, hard-boiled, messy mess of a detective with trauma, past trauma. His partner got killed by this creature. They don't know it's a creature at the time. I think it was a serial killer. His partner was killed by them. He hooks up with his partner's wife, causes this, guilt, trauma, blah, blah, blah. His apartment's a mess, which is supposed to let us know that he's a mess. I mean, I don't know how many times that's been done in cop movies in general, sci-fi cop movies, whatever. That seems to be kind of rote for these types of things. So he's real serious, but then a lot of times he acts real goofy too, especially when he hooks up with his partner, Dick Durkin, who dreamt up that name.
Okay, so I have never seen Neil Duncan in anything else, which kind of feels like a shame because, and this may be a big disagreement between the two of us. I actually think he really works.
He was pretty fun.
It was pretty good. He was pretty good, right?
I wasn't super. We watched so many British shows. I'm like, he's probably been in something that we've watched. So I looked at his IMDb page and just saw tons and tons of voice work. He's Pennyworth on a bunch of the Batman animated shows. He's been in tons of other animated shows, and I couldn't really scroll through
video game voices too.
Yeah, couldn't find stuff. He looks vaguely familiar to me, but yeah, he was interesting. He held his own against Rutger Hauer, I would say.
Which I feel like is not an easy thing to do given I guess so far this month, I have seen Rutger Hauer by himself in Blind Fury, I guess with a child actor, and then in Wanted Dead or Alive up against Gene Simmons. Because, I mean, in this movie, he's up against a monster who you don't see until the last 2 minutes of them. No exaggeration.
Just brief glimpses of.
Yeah. So, I think Neil Duncan as kind of Rutger Hauer's partner, put upon partner, as the narrative tends to need. I think he really works. And I think Rutger Hauer also is the kind of actor who allows someone else to come on screen and even take away the focus from him. There are plenty of actors who, like, you can tell that them being the focus is important to them. And I really like that Rutger Hauer plays off of Neil Duncan really well. They like, that is one of the stronger parts of this movie, even if it's kind of the part that almost is the most tonally inconsistent and almost feels out of place in this movie, because it does. Rutger Hauer and Neil Duncan's kind of relationship and back and forth is believable, and I really liked it.
Yeah, that was the thing that propelled me along this time, was their interaction. Because right. I start to feel myself getting cynical about the movie as I'm watching it, thinking, like the sheet metal hallway in the police station, that's supposed to represent our future world of 2008 London. I'm like, that set decoration is awful.
Well, and I think that's the big thing about this movie is the set design is like a failing.
Well, when they're knocking over the cabinets, the press board cabinetry in the apartment, when they really first get a glimpse of the creature and realize that it's not a man, I was like, oh boy, the budget didn't go to this set decoration at all. This place is really cheap there. And then when they're bumping into the walls in the hallway of that apartment complex that he lives in, you can see them move and stuff like that. That's kind of the things you catch in bad movies when you're riffing on them or whatever. And so that kind of pulls me out a little bit, but their relationship kept me engaged enough to not just be like, oh my God, this is just a pain to watch or whatever.
Well, and that's kind of the same for me as well. With Kim Cattrall in the movie, who your mileage with her as an actress is going to vary. I think there were times where the quality of the movie became too much in the negative direction. And I mentioned her because I think she is one of the parts of this movie that does not work. And I don't know if that's her fault. I don't think it is. I haven't seen her in enough stuff to really have an opinion about her as an actress. But in this movie, the script does nothing with her character other than make her the damsel in distress. And that's it. And her relationship with Rutger Hauer is kind of also very undefined and strange in a way that, like, the movie not defining it is not really an issue, but expecting us to care, I think, is the bigger one, because I don't care about their relationship.
I think it has to do a lot with, we need a love interest. We need someone who's going to get kidnapped.
Right. Which I would contend the movie doesn't need a love interest.
Right. And their relationship is odd because this is the ex-wife of his partner that was killed. And I felt like they didn't really know what their relationship was. So I sort of bought into that being not really explained clearly. It feels like they're conflicted about it as well. So that seems to me to fit with the rest of the story. But she is completely underutilized in this and ends up being a convenient plot device to get them into the subway for the finale.
That's it. That is like all she is used for, really. And so that there could be nudity.
Yeah, you get to see her naked a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, that's fine. That's fine and all.
With her Star Trek haircut still.
Oh my God. Her haircut in this movie is it's futuristic, all right.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
The far distant future of 2008.
Yeah, right. Where everyone's going to look like they've got bob haircuts, huh?
People really need to take a cue from Dune when they're doing sci-fi and just set things like 20,000 years in the future so that there's no way to that anybody watching
analog,
so that nobody in 2022 can watch it and go, the far distant future of 2008.
So let's talk a little bit about where we think the budget for the movie. So what do you think?
Oh, didn't go into set direction.
Yeah, boy, it didn't. What do you think of the monster?
It's okay. I think it isn't necessarily, well, from what I read, it was rushed. The guy didn't have much time to create something. It's going to seem familiar to a lot of people that watch this. It's not something you haven't really seen before. The tall, black, it's not unlike Predator as far as size and, with a big funky head. It's maybe looks like one of the steps in the evolution of a xenomorph. It's a pretty basic all black creature. Are we saying alien? Because is that really what it is? Or is it?
I think it's the occult. Is it a demon?
They keep saying demon because we've got this occult line.
I'm going with demon. I assumed it was a demon, like a terrestrial creature.
Yeah, it seems like they're heading in the occult direction. And then at some point they say, oh, no, this isn't the occult. It's, I don't know. These symbols mean something else when they figure out. It's the lunar
cycle.
Yeah. So
I liked the idea of the creature. I liked that Rutger Hauer and the creature are kind of psychically linked because it, scratched him barely, and then he has these giant scratches on his arm. It was very barely touched him, and that one scene was like, and then it cuts to him with his shirt open. I was like, that did that from that, like, oh my God, like, Jesus Christ. Well, because at the end of the movie it has its hand on his head, and I'm like, just gonna pop his fucking head off or something.
Yeah.
But the creature doesn't. Yeah, the creature is physically imposing when you see it, but then you see it a couple more times. It's one of these creatures where the creature benefits from not being on screen. Like,
yes.
It's the Jaws logic. Like, don't show it unless you have to, because you can get away with more with it off screen than once you show it. And this creature definitely falls into that camp. And the creature doesn't look great when you finally see it. And you know what I think the reason is? I think the design is sound. I think it's not contrasting enough. I think it's just kind of all black.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, well, why give it some accents of something? Because it looks just very one-dimensional. I mean, when you see it on the poster, it looks cool because it's kind of lit from above and you can kind of see the shadows and stuff. But then when you see it in the movie, it's just flat black. And it doesn't look great. It's lit poorly. I'm not sure there was a good way to light it. And, like you mentioned, it was rushed. But, the people involved with designing the creature are not, they know what they're doing. Steve Norrington has worked on all kinds of stuff. And he worked under Rick Baker and Dick Smith and Stan Winston. So, he's not... he's not unknown here. But yeah, it's just very poorly designed from a color standpoint.
It's not an inspired design.
No.
The only real oddity is the visor, the motorcycle visor eyes.
It's kind of cool.
Big wraparound glasses and the large teeth-lined mouth, which, like I said, reminded me of Venom.
Right. Which I'm right there with you on that one. Totally. It has Venom vibes. It has Alien vibes. Like I said, it kind of reminded me of Judge Dredd with that visor because Judge Dredd has the visor. And that's another dystopian thing. That's kind of why Judge Dredd jumped to mind. But yeah, I think it's unfortunate because the promise of the movie, I think, is interesting. And kind of what the movie wants to be, I think, I'm on board with that. A sci-fi action. It's not an action movie. I feel like that's the other problem. Like the action that they tried to shoehorn in isn't good. It's better than it could have been, maybe, but it's not. I don't know. I think a lot of it stems from the limitations of what they're working with the creature. That creature you do not see it until the last 10 minutes of the movie. You don't even see like shots of it. You see kind of like
shadow.
Yeah, I don't know how to explain. It's like a whoosh, or that they show something to signify that it is there. They have this heartbeat thing throughout the movie. It's like, you hear that? That's its heartbeat. But I feel like the action suffers because of the creature.
Well, the biggest thing I noticed this time watching it that I felt did a disservice to the film was the editing. It's very clunky in a lot of scenes. And I think some shots in the action sequences last for about 2 seconds longer than they should, to where something happens, somebody falls or something explodes or crashes, and we hold on it 2 seconds too long to where we see the end of it, and it's then lost its effectiveness. If you cut it when the audience is still kind of going, from it, then and move on to the next shot, then it's going to seem like it's moving faster, like stuff is happening much quicker, and it'll just move. You're going to fill in the blanks instead of them showing you the outcome.
It's a very strange complaint, that normally it's the exact opposite. 9 times out of 10, it's too fast.
Well,
like with stuff now, at least it's like everything's way too fast.
But I just think of low budget action movies that I've seen, and one of the most successful aspects of them is the editing. If you have an editor who knows when to cut action, then you're going to cover up the plyboard cabinets. They're going to catch a lot of that stuff and maybe use a different shot where I'm not going to catch that and then go like, kind of roll my eyes. You can make up for a lot of the detriments of your film with good editing. So that felt to me like it was probably the least successful technical aspect of the film was the editing.
That's kind of surprising because the editor on this film worked on Candyman same year. And, that's a really successful movie. I'm not sure it's successful because of the editing, but it's a successful movie. So somebody knew what they were doing when they were editing it.
And again, it could be rushed production time. It could just be that there wasn't enough coverage for the editor to work with.
I also think it's not an action movie.
Yeah, and it can be. The original director left the film.
Yeah,
because things weren't going very well. So it could be all kinds of things. There's no way to know unless someone writes a tell-all book about Split Second from their perspective.
How do you feel? I'm assuming you've seen The Burning.
Yes.
Tony Maylam's other film. Do you like The Burning?
I do. I believe I did an episode on it for my Why Do I Hate Slashers series.
I know I've done an episode on it for my show with Jess, I believe. She did summer camp movies a couple years ago.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay.
Yeah, it's one of those. Again, it's kind of weird tonally.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Completely. When I was thinking, like, it's a tonally weird movie.
And I think a lot of its, not notoriety, but cachet comes from, Tom Savini effects, having all these familiar faces. We always talk about, George Clooney's first movie was a horror movie, Brad Pitt's, Jennifer Aniston, all these people that became huge stars in the 90s, 80s and 90s started. But this one has, like 5 or 6 of those people, maybe that didn't become big stars, but were recognizable actors. Holly Hunter's in it for a hot second with no lines, but you've got Jason Alexander, you've got all these other people.
Fisher Stevens
getting his fingers chopped off. The other guy in that boat, he's a character actor that shows up in tons of stuff. And then I always get it confused with some of the other summer camp slasher films, but I believe this is the one that actually has kids getting killed.
It is. Yeah. Like children. Yeah.
Off screen.
That's what kind of makes it so. Yeah. That's where the guy goes into the thing with kills him, right?
Yeah. I believe it's the young kids are out like camping. They have a campground, but they're off in sleeping bags out in the wild camping. I believe this is the one. I may be getting it confused with Sleepaway Camp, but I don't think so. Anyway, so you have that, and then a lot of humor, the Jason Alexander character. So yeah, tonally weird, but it is a very interesting film from that time, which is why I chose to actually, focus an episode on it. Other than that, I don't know that guy from anything else.
So I actually watched another Tony Maylam film earlier this year, The Sins of Dorian Gray, which is a Rankin and Bass movie.
Oh my God.
And it was not great. So I have seen one more of his movies than you have, and I can tell you that movie is not much better than this one. I mean, it's granted TV movie.
Okay. When I see that and I see the image from that film, I always think it's a softcore.
No, it's
movie.
it's a Rankin and Bass film of all things. So yeah.
Okay.
But it's not great either. The Burning is fine. It is what it is. I'm not a super big fan of summer camp movies, primarily because most of them all do the same thing. And you could pick one and probably have seen more or less all of them in a lot of ways. So, of the things that I've seen, this is probably the best of the 3 that Tony Maylam has done. I mean, my mileage is going to vary on The Burning versus yours.
Yeah, I would pick The Burning, but
I think ultimately, when you use Blade Runner and Alien as source inspiration, neither one of those movies are action movies. Like Blade Runner is not an action movie at all. Like Blade Runner is kind of its own thing. It's more like a sci-fi horror movie than it really is an action movie because there's not really any action in it. It's like a cop procedural. Like, do you consider cop procedurals action? Like, not really. Like, I personally don't.
Chase scenes,
right?
If you consider that an action movie,
yeah,
whatever.
Right. I don't personally consider foot chases with guns action movies.
No.
I consider that cop because this is like a cop procedural, really. I mean, this is kind of in a lot of ways. What it reminds me of is like, imagine if Seven was set in the future.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I read, and this is IMDb trivia, so your mileage will vary, that it was an inspiration for the look of Seven. And I'm going, yeah, I mean, again, it's that constant rain, the dreary days, just, no sunlight.
Right. Filmed in eternally gray
and eternally wet. And you can just imagine, like you mentioned earlier, how miserable that can be. I mean, just spend like 10 minutes outside in the rain and I'm miserable. But it's, we've talked about the mashup of genres here, and it's also sort of playing on the Jack the Ripper theme where, I mean, if you want to consider that a mystery, in a sense, where we have somebody cutting hearts out of victims. Not that Jack the Ripper just did hearts, but that's the first thing that comes to my mind when you hear about a quote unquote serial killer, because that's how this is going in that direction from the beginning, that this is a serial killer that cuts the hearts out of their victims. So I'm thinking, oh, well, that's Jack the Ripper. Sherlock Holmes kind of played in that sandbox, or at least movies about Sherlock Holmes. There's been a number where Holmes tackles the Jack the Ripper case. And so add mystery to the mix, I guess, as well as horror, sci-fi, semi-action. And yeah, maybe that's one too many things thrown in the pot.
Well, that's the other thing. I've never seen the movie that this movie was changed because of the first Power. I wanted to watch it. It's a Lou Diamond Phillips film.
Yes. I think I watched them the same year.
Well, they came out the same. They came out within 2 years of one another.
I can understand the comparison. That leans more into the satanic aspect of it, but I believe it's a serial killer who's...
Yeah, it's a serial killer with pentagrams and stuff, and they've thought that this was too similar. And again, I get that, but I think this movie would have worked better if you had taken something out. I think what would have made this movie work better is take out the future stuff, like the Blade Runner stuff, because that frees up your budget. That allows you to spend more time on things. And probably Tony Maylam doesn't walk away if they're not setting it in this waterbound nightmare, because that probably is what's causing production to slow down. Jesus Christ, can you imagine? Like, making a movie is hard enough. Making a movie in a waterbound set where your actors are constantly wet and submerged in water sounds like a fucking nightmare. Don't work with kids. Don't work with animals. Don't work in sets underwater. It's just, it's one of those things where you can't get around it. It's like filming It. You can't get around the fact that you're going to have to be in a sewer half of that movie. But I guarantee you this filmmaker is going to do as much as they can to not be in the sewer more than they need to. Right. Because who wants to be running around in a sewer, feeling wet, feeling dirty? Yeah, it's not positive for anybody. But this movie goes full hog on it. At least it tries to.
Yeah, and there are too many ideas going on.
Which is fine. It happens.
There's that. There's the love interest thing, the dead partner, we
had flashbacks of that don't do anything.
The cop who's goes against the grain. It starts with him having just been suspended, but he's immediately brought back. The dynamic between him and the Pete Postlethwaite character, it's all, a lot of it is serving the same purpose. Okay, we get it. He's a rogue cop.
Yeah.
That's such a trope.
How rogue is he?
For these movies anyway, that I don't know. I kind of want to see a straight-laced guy with a nice apartment to get put in this kind of scenario as opposed to the rogue cop.
No, I'm with you. And then you get something like Seven. I mean, that's Seven, right? Yeah, and that's the thing, I see glimmers of like a really good movie in here, because if you trim, and the crazy thing, this movie is 90 minutes. It's not like it overstays its welcome.
Yeah.
Somehow it kind of drags at 90 minutes. It's 10 minutes longer than a movie theoretically needs to be considered a feature length film.
The scenes with Kim Cattrall are too long.
Oh, woof, man. She is just flighty.
Well, there's no dynamic.
Is the word I would use. Like, she just seems strange. No chemistry whatsoever.
No chemistry. Yeah, it's another kind of shoehorned plot element that doesn't quite work.
Not at all. Because again, I understand why they give him this partner, because the partner gives him the opportunity to like understand the killer and kind of have this to be like, all right, I'm going after the killer because he killed my partner. And like, that should be motivation enough. I don't need to see the guys, because they even mention her in like the intro of the movie. It's like, and he had a affair with the guy's wife. Like, who fucking cares? And
he was already dead, so who cares?
Right. He's dead. Who cares?
So it's not really an affair.
Right. And then the other thing is, she, like you've mentioned, she exists to be captured at the end of the movie. So she's really not given anything to do. She's given no agency of her own.
Right.
Up until like right at the end, where she kind of gets involved in the climax. All of a sudden they're like, oh, she's there, so maybe we can have her do something. Which is too bad, because, she's not a bad actress.
She holds her own in Big Trouble in Little China.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. I always forget she's in that movie. Wow.
She's Grace, whatever the fuck her name is. Just watched it not that long ago with my daughter. Talk about a mashup movie that works. I mean, how many things are going on in Big Trouble in Little China?
Yeah, for real. Well, I think though, and I think you would agree, John Carpenter is the master of genre meshing.
Yeah, and that's the thing is that and tones too. Even I mean, it's for the most part goofy, but there are serious things going on in there too, and
right,
sort of serious scares and what the fuck moments and stuff. But it's all layered with that. No, I don't even want to say goofy, but magical tone that makes it all work. Like this is a world where anything can happen, so all this stuff is fine.
Yeah. That little floating eyeball creature, those guys exploding and doing stuff. David Lopan just being old and then not being old. Like, sure. I buy into it. I don't care. That creature that follows Kurt Russell, like the Bigfoot-esque creature. Sure, why not? Who cares? I don't know.
You've established this world of magic that Westerners aren't attuned to. Yeah, this is kind of a clunker for me. I can see. I don't know if this has gotten a boutique label release or not. I would sort of assume that it is one of those movies that could and would probably do very well because of, like I speculated at the beginning, I'm sure there's a whole generation of kids that caught this a ton on cable and like it for that nostalgia. It's not a god-awful movie.
It was given a Blu-ray release by 101 Films.
Okay.
So they're a boutique UK label. Yeah, so it is not an American version, I don't think.
Yeah, I mean, I can see it working for a lot of people. It just doesn't work all that well for me.
I think that there is enough for most. You know what I mean? I think there's enough for most people to get into it. I mean, it does have a cult following. It is a popular Rutger Hauer movie. You know, there aren't a lot of movies where he's the lead. I mean, there's a handful of them, and a lot of them are, you know, not this. I mean, this really is putting him back into a world he's familiar with, and it's trading on the Blade Runner thing. I mean, it really is. Like it's trading on you going, you like those movies? Well, you'll like this one. And you know what? I don't think that's one-to-one. I don't think if you like Blade Runner, you're going to like this movie. And I don't think if you like this movie, you're going to like Blade Runner. Because I think people watching this movie had different expectations. And frankly, I had different expectations for this movie. I thought this was going to be more of an action movie. But I think that this, once again, kind of falls into this camp of Rutger Hauer is an unconventional action star. He really is. He makes movies that, like, okay, let me ask you, who else could be the lead in this movie? Who else would you cast in this movie? All other things the same. Who from the late 80s or late 90s would you cast as the lead in a movie like this?
I automatically think of Schwarzenegger for one thing. And I mean, the action would probably get ramped up in that case.
Right. It'd probably be less of a horror movie.
But he's done plenty of buddy cop movies, action movies with sci-fi tinges.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Lots of sci-fi in Schwarzenegger's catalog. Which is weird that he doesn't stray away from that. He doesn't stray away from sci-fi. Like Schwarzenegger, I would consider him to be a sci-fi action star in a lot of ways. Like the movies that made him famous are sci-fi movies. Terminator, Predator, Total Recall, Running Man. Yeah. I mean, he has the pure action movies in there. Commando, Raw Deal, Red Heat. Commando's a fucking amazing movie, man.
It really is my favorite Arnold action movie.
It's a perfect movie. It's a perfect action movie.
I just love it. I mean,
everything about it is amazing.
It all
music, the character actors. It's perfect.
another one of those. It's another one of those like The Hitcher that I watched a ton back then and just really loved. And I don't think it's just nostalgia. I think this is genuinely a really great movie.
And it's kind of tonally inconsistent because there's a lot of comedy in it. There's a lot of humor. I mean, action, I think, lends itself to slapstick humor. I mean, that was kind of what I was expecting. I was like, oh, is there not going to... I was hoping there would be some like slapstick humor in this movie with the action. There's just not enough action. Like, there's one scene where Neil Duncan gets shot out of a window, which is fucking hilarious.
That's the part that confused me.
Is it supposed to be funny that he's getting shot out the window? Because I laughed.
I was like, oh, his partner dies. Okay. And then I must have just kind of like blanked because he's back in just fine shape, like a scene or two later. And I was like, wait a minute, what?
But he's like,
Who got shot out of the window?
He's like, but you've never heard of bulletproof vests? It's like, fuck you, dude.
He got, yeah.
Got blown out of a window. That doesn't, bulletproof vests don't stop you from eating shit on the concrete.
Blowed out of a window.
Yes, like forcefully thrown out of a window.
Okay, so yeah.
It was not just you. No, he just goes, hey, you ever heard of bulletproof vests? It's like, that doesn't explain you flying out of the window, though.
And not being worse the wear for
right. Like, oh, well. And then towards the end of the movie, he just like all of a sudden has like, okay, you know what? Explain something to me because I must have missed this. How did he get that map on his chest? Was it when he went underwater?
No, I think if I followed it, Rutger Hauer finds him in the back of the Jeep and he's already bleeding at that point, but he hasn't removed his shirt, doesn't remove his shirt. He realizes in the apartment, oh, I'm bleeding. And then he faints and then they find it. But he had been bleeding previously.
Strange. Okay, so it was
and had
strange,
scratches on his shirt.
Okay.
Like the creature kind of went through his shirt and did it, and instead of it being ripped open.
Okay. Because there definitely is this idea that like the creature is trying to get Rutger Hauer to come to it, which is like not really explained.
Yeah, that
not really.
That heartbeat you mentioned is the creature, but it's also Rutger Hauer's. That's how he's connected.
Right.
So when he hears or feels that, he knows that the creature is near.
Another idea kind of done nothing with. Like there's so much. This movie is jam-packed with ideas. Like the creature's bite maybe does something too. And then the creature at some point just knows how to mail things because it's mailing a heart, or it dropped the heart off, I guess. Because the creature is the creature invisible? I
don't think so. Yeah. There are a lot of ideas that don't get fleshed out, and those are the kinds of things that I think appeal when you're just a teenager watching these movies and you're not dissecting the film. You're sitting there and you're watching it and you're going, oh, from the first kill on, it's like, oh, this is gory. This is pretty bloody. You don't see the kills happen. You see the aftermath, but they're done pretty well as far as the special effects go, and all of the death scenes are just drenched in blood. Cleo was out for a little bit of it, and it was the victim that's in the bathtub in his apartment complex. And I was like, oh my God, that bathroom. And she's like, why is that so bloody? And I was like, early 90s movie. Yeah,
I mean, why not? But just got to go somewhere.
So you're picking, I can totally see watching this at a younger age and picking up on that stuff. Like I said, there's boobies, there's blood, there's all that fun stuff that teens enjoy, or teen boys at least, or teen girls do enjoy. And the other stuff wouldn't really register like it does now when you're sitting there going, how can I pick this movie apart?
And you know what? Gary Scott Thompson's probably not too worried about critiques of Split Second. Do you know why?
Yeah.
Do you know why? You know what he has a credit on? He has a based on characters created by credit on the Fast and the Furious films. And he hasn't worked on it since 2003. Can you imagine the money he's been getting from that? And he has probably done nothing for almost 2 decades now. So yeah, no, he wrote the original Fast and the Furious, which I'm sure has been like fucking printing money. So good for him, because you know what? Those movies are good action movies.
Get that created by money, man. Every time they make a new one.
Hell yeah. No, good. Like seriously, this movie aside, good for him, because the script is a mess, but it's clear that the person writing it has a firm grasp on the kinds of movies that this movie is inspired by. Whether or not this movie is really a success, completely different story. But
I think the original version sounds a lot more interesting to me.
Yeah. Before they started just kind of making changes, because look, you can release your movie if something else is coming out that's similar. Deep Impact and Armageddon came out the same summer. Like one does not preclude the other. Frankly, it just means you get compared. You're getting compared to it now either way, because you've said you changed it because of the other movie. Like, I don't know. I don't agree with that.
And this comes out 2 years after that one. So I don't know if it was just a matter of I'm writing it while this one came out, so I'm going to get accused of ripping it off that he was worried about, or what. But
and it's not like that movie. I mean, that movie doubled its budget. But it's not like, people are like, oh my God, I just love the first Power, cult classic. This movie is probably more of a cult classic than that movie is, because it has the alien creature in it, because it has Rutger Hauer, not Lou Diamond Phillips. I mean, Lou Diamond Phillips is a perfectly fine character actor, but he's not in the same caliber as Rutger Hauer. Whether or not he's been ever given a project like Blade Runner is a different story, but I mean, again, that's the other thing. Like, Rutger Hauer was in Blade Runner. Rutger Hauer was in The Hitcher. But, like, Rutger Hauer was not in a lot of high-profile projects afterwards. Like, stuff that's as culturally significant as Blade Runner.
Yeah.
And that's hard as an actor. That has got to be hard to reconcile, like, I have been in the movie that I will be known for forever now.
Right.
And it was, like, within the first, 20 roles of his career. I can't put myself in that position of the actor who has that, because there are plenty of them. Rutger Hauer. I mean, a lot of actors in the 80s, they made their bones in the 80s, and then they've been living off of it since and just working actors. If Ridley Scott never directed Blade Runner, who knows if we'd still be talking about it? If Harrison Ford wasn't in Blade Runner, who knows if we'd still be talking about it? If Rutger Hauer wasn't in Blade Runner, because I think those are the three big components, really. And then the script obviously has a huge hand in that. But yeah, can you imagine that? Like, I've been in the one thing everybody's going to know me for. Because I think it's either Blade Runner or The Hitcher with Rutger Hauer, right? At least that's my perception of Rutger Hauer from a mainstream movie-going audience. People who watch more than just the important movies, I think, would have, Nighthawks, different answers. People might answer this for Rutger Hauer movies that they love. And I don't think that would be wrong, because, again, Rutger Hauer is an unconventional action star who's not given these kinds of roles to be the lead very often. But in the 80s, he was, because he still was living off of that Blade Runner Hitcher cachet.
Yeah. And I think he doesn't get to that recognition again until not that long ago with Hobo with a Shotgun. I think that was sort of a big resurfacing of him, and which is a pretty fun film. I don't think I like it as much as a lot of other people do, but honestly,
I would love to revisit that movie. I have not seen it in I can't even remember last time I saw it. A decade?
It's been a while. I came to it late, but I know that I watched it at least 3 or 4 years ago. He was on a season of one of my favorite shows, Channel Zero, that they took the creepypasta stories. And the season he was on was fucking weird.
Yeah.
I mean, they're all weird, but
that show is kind of a weird little thing that I don't think enough people really watched, because I remember liking that first season a lot.
Oh man, that first season,
Candle
blew me away.
I mean, Candle Cove is like the greatest copy pasta. There's a reason why they did.
Talk about creepy, man. That thing was just
it's also made for people your age. Like, that specific story is made for like kids who are in the 80s watching shit like that on TV.
Yeah. There's so much imagery in that first season. It's just like,
No, I'm with you. And Rutger Hauer, when you look at his filmography, it really is just like peppered with all kinds of just weird little roles that make up the body of a character actor's work. And look, it's not like when Blade Runner came out, people were like, this movie's going to be important. There were people who were saying that, but it was like 90% of the people watching that movie were like, this movie is not good. And it's pearls before swine in a lot of ways. Like, this is a movie that is going to find its audience over time, and it will influence things from here until eternity, including, like, it's strange. Rutger Hauer is in a movie a decade after Blade Runner that is influenced by the movie he was in. Mm-hmm. Like, that's a little weird. And it's originally the writers of this film wanted to get the guy who was the lead in that movie. So
yeah, you see a lot of that with people who have kind of hit rock bottom, where, I mean, I almost hate to bring this up because we know part of the reason why these were going on, but those recent Bruce Willis movies that are hinging on the Die Hard and those action movie things, some actors go through that period where some young kid's written this script that's so obviously a Die Hard ripoff, a Blade Runner ripoff, an Alien ripoff, and you get the aging star to be in it. and it's sort of a sad venture all around.
Especially if they're in it more than 5 minutes. Like Steven Seagal figured out how to do it. He's just in it for like 2 seconds.
Right.
Like, he's like in it for 10 minutes total. And like the rest of the movie are just like actors you've never heard of. And it's shot in Eastern Europe.
Right.
Like,
and that's not the case with this. I'm just saying that that's usually when you see somebody return to a property that's so much like something they did before. It's usually on the way down, or that they've hit down or whatever. Not that Bruce Willis had hit rock bottom before making those direct to video or VOD movies, but
Rutger Hauer was only like 15 years into his career with this movie.
Yeah, I still need to go back and watch his early films with Paul Verhoeven. Those are the ones that are kind of on my list now to explore, because it seems like they had a real interesting working relationship and made some interesting sounding films.
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, Rutger Hauer has a lot of movies that are not in English because he is not an American actor. He's a Dutch actor. I mean, with a name like Rutger Hauer, he's definitely not from upstate New York. So
I'm surprised you didn't change it to Ralph Howard for his American
Ralph Howard. I mean, Rutger Hauer is one of the great actor names, though. Like Rutger Hauer.
Kind of lets you know what you're getting into.
Yeah, and that's his actual fucking name. Like, that's not his stage name. Rutger Hauer is his real name. No, he's, one of our Patreon supporters program this month, and he was like, Rutger Hauer movies. And I was like, I have, very little exposure. It's really Hobo with a Shotgun and Die Hard, Blade Runner. That's it. But now it's like, I would like to watch more of these kinds of movies where he's the lead, because it's weird to see an actor like Rutger Hauer as the lead of the movie.
I don't think I've seen Wanted Dead or Alive since I was in my teens or 20s. I mean, obviously The Hitcher we've already talked about, but I did go through a little Rutger Hauer phase, probably back the first time I watched this, and I love Nighthawks too. So I watched Nighthawks. I watched The Osterman Weekend, which is pretty cool. Which I always get confused with one of Chuck Norris's movies, The Octagon, I think, because they sort of start similarly. I mean, they sound similar, but anyway, yeah, I think I think you'll have a good time with them. I don't know how many of them you've already watched, but
I've watched everything but Surviving the Game.
He can bring us that. I mean, I really think of Nighthawks and The Hitcher, where he's this like cold-blooded yet charming killer. And he does that very well, which I think is missing from this one.
I think Rutger Hauer is a better villain than he is a hero, but I think when you give him the hero role, I don't think this is the right way to do it. I think he should have been like more uptight, like you said, living in a better apartment, not this like, oh, he's this troubled, cop. Like that just gets old anyway.
You slice it.
Yeah, well, there is that. I mean, that's just, that's so rote and so uninteresting. And again, even outside of that, I think the movie still offers up something worth checking out. I think Rutger Hauer and Neil Duncan are fun together. I think the movie really benefits from that. I think the movie could have done more with that and less of everything else. If it had just been the two of them chasing down this monster, man, I would have been game for that. Like a sci-fi action movie. Cool. Where the monster is creepy, but like that doesn't make it a horror movie. I don't think this is a horror movie. I think it tries to be, but I don't think it is. I think there are horrifying things that happen in this movie, like people getting their hearts ripped out, but I don't think this is a horror movie. Do you?
No, I think the only real relation to that is the fairly gory kills, and that it is probably a monster and not an alien. I just kept thinking of The Hidden while I was watching this.
Right.
They're not really, I mean, they're kind of buddy cop, but it's that fish out of water, which this doesn't really get into.
It's a buddy cop movie.
After a weird alien kind of thing. So, I don't know.
I think the other thing about this movie is you have the opportunity with Rutger Hauer and this alien creature and their connection to do something with that, and they never do anything with it. So they keep mentioning it as important, like he's the only one who can kill this creature. He's got to be the one to kill this creature. He knows more about everybody else when it comes to killing this creature. And then it's like, but the way they figure out where the creature is, anybody could have figured that out. It's nothing about him specifically. It's just a lot going on, man. I don't know.
In some cases, it also turns into a plot convenience where he knows where he's going to be ahead of time. Like, why is he at that club at the beginning? Because he knows, he feels it. So he's always going to be where the thing is happening.
And then supposedly, I guess some like random people can see the creature too. The dog could see him. There is so much going on in this movie that like we'll probably have forgotten stuff that's like weird and random to bring up.
Yeah, that you mentioned the invisibility thing, and I get it now. I think I missed on some of those
right, because he's like talking to the dog. He's like, "You saw him, didn't you?" And it's like, is the creature also now invisible?
Right. Yeah. See, again, not explored.
There's a lot going on, man. Just like it's
too many ideas.
It is just it's an idea fest. And look, like take some of these ideas and put them in another script. I was doing a read through with Mike White of the Projection Booth and a friend of his, Andy Rausch, who's an author, and we were doing a read through of the Lucas and Spielberg and Kasdan recordings for Raiders, and they had a lot of ideas that ended up getting used in Temple of Doom and Last Crusade. And like, if they had jammed all of that into that movie, it would have been like this, where it's like 8 million things too many.
It's the Dan Aykroyd scenario.
Yeah. Original Ghostbusters was a unfilmable script, quote unquote.
I mean, most of his have been. Blues Brothers had just tons of shit cut out of it.
And then you make the movie where it is his movie and it's a fucking insane nightmare film.
Right.
That film being nothing but trouble, a film that I feel like is worth revisiting at some point. I don't know.
I've never watched it because it just looked too much for me.
It's a lot. It's that would you show your daughter a lot of films. Well, yeah. I have got one for you.
I think she might stop coming on my show after that.
Yeah, right. Well, so as we bring this episode to a close, I do have to ask you, what is your Rutger Hauer film of choice?
I haven't watched Blade Runner in a long time because the last time I watched it, I got a little bored, I hate to say. It's kind of a boring movie in a lot of ways.
I was watching it yesterday and it kind of is.
I'm going to have to go with The Hitcher because that is not a boring movie. That's my go-to.
Blade Runner is it a controversial opinion to say Blade Runner is just okay? It's got a good Rutger Hauer performance. Harrison Ford is there.
Yeah, it's a really weird.
It's just weird movie all around. I don't know. Like every time I watch the movie, I feel like I'm in a dream watching it.
See, and I grew up watching the theatrical cut with the narration. Still have a little bit of nostalgia for that one.
I kind of like that version of the movie.
And I don't know. I don't know.
It's more in tune with the literary nature of the story that it's based off of. And that's a problem because that's not what anybody wants with that movie. They almost want to forget that it's a Philip Dick story altogether.
As a kid, I never heard the narration as being like, and Harrison Ford has disputed this claim that he kind of did it half-assed and poorly. And he was like, no, I did, I went in to do a job and I did it. I didn't necessarily think it was a good idea, but I'm a professional and I did it. And it just sounds like a disaffected gumshoe narration. Like he's not supposed to have a bunch of feeling, right?
He's a robot. I mean, it would make sense with the whole he's a fucking replicant thing, right? That people love to bring up.
I haven't watched that version in a long time, and I wonder if I would enjoy it more than watching it without narration, because I loved that movie as a kid and watched it all the time and don't remember being bored by it at 14 years old. So it's like, why am I bored by it at 50 something? And maybe the version.
Yeah, I haven't seen that narration version in forever.
I haven't. I mean, I'm sure it's available on one of the. I should check my DVD actually to see if it even includes that version.
I have the special edition version of Blade Runner that they did a couple years ago, where it came in the briefcase. Do you know what I'm talking about? Mm-hmm. It was the Blu-ray opens with the briefcase and it's got the little car and a crane and all. Yeah. I think it's on there. I know that there's like 4 versions of the movie. Yeah, right. I know that that's like a super duper unpopular opinion, but like I like Blade Runner just fine. I appreciate what he did, but like I don't mind the narration Sorry, like it doesn't bother me the way it like some people have like this visceral reaction to it. It's like, oh, it's terrible with the narration. It's like I don't see it that way. Like that's the way that's the original way the movie was presented. Yeah, I know it got studio meddling and stuff, but that's the way it came out. Like that's the way it came out. Like that's the way anybody who would have seen it and then dropped dead the next day would have any frame of reference. That's the movie that they saw. Like I'm not trying to be an ass, but like that's just Ridley Scott has done tons of stuff to it since, but like there are plenty of films that come out that never get any of that, and that's just the movie you saw in the theater. Like split second, it's the movie you saw in the theater is the movie that's coming out. Like too bad.
The other complaint about the narration that always bothered me was that he's describing things that are happening on the screen, but it's like, have you ever watched a film noir? Because that's what they do.
Yeah.
they're repeating the stuff that you're seeing on this. I mean, it's that to me is not a complaint. It's like a lot of narration does that.
I've heard that before. I think Father Malone has said something to the like, then I saw the red door and there's a red door on screen. Like, yeah, we get it. But yeah, no, I'm kind of with you. Like there is this part of me that's just like that. They're nailing what they're going for. I just don't think a lot of people like that. That's a different issue. Like if you don't like it, that's fine. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the filmmaker is not successful in what they're doing. Like I don't like the best example we always use is I don't like Sharon Stone in Casino. But I know that is because that is the intent of the filmmakers for me to not like Sharon Stone in Casino. Like that's their job and they're doing it rather well. It's just I don't like what they're doing. And, you can not like the narration in Blade Runner. That's fine. But it doesn't mean that it's not being successful at what it's trying to do.
Right. I agree. Yeah. So that's The Hitcher is probably my go-to Rutger Hauer film.
I think by the end of this month, I may have the same answer as you because I jumped ahead and watched it already. And I'm going to have to rewatch it again. And I'm going to look for different things. And
it's a doozy.
Yeah, it's something else. I will say what this movie reminded me of as we bring this to a close. And it's a super duper deep cut. And I'm not sure if you know what I'm going to talk about here, but there was a alien like ride that you could go on in the late 80s, early 90s in London. And it was called like Alien Underground. And it took place on what looks like this set. And you would like go on foot and walk around and there would be people dressed up like colonial Marines. And there'd be people dressed up like aliens and you would get into an APC and like it would move and stuff. And like when I was watching this movie, I was like, man, did they just film it on that set? Like that they were just like, hey, can we have it for, because again, like you said, like it looks so kind of like everything else we've seen before. That it's like, because it looks like so many other things, I can't really nail down what it looks like, but it doesn't look like anything original. And that's honestly, that's what you could put on this film's box.
It doesn't look like anything original.
but again, like it's not terrible in spite of that. Like it still kind of works. I would throw this on. I mean, Neil Duncan and Rutger Hauer are good enough to get through the later part of the movie. The first 20, 30 minutes might be a little bit of a slog because they're not really playing off one another. But in the later parts of the movie where he just kind of goes, at least Neil Duncan just goes fully unhinged, I appreciated that. But it's getting there. That's the problem. Is an hour and a half movie and it drags in the first 30 minutes. Like that's not a good sign.
Yeah, it's not. I think my original rating on Letterboxd was 2.5 stars, which for me, I think I tend to rate stuff sort of on the high end. So I wouldn't change it after today, but that's probably being maybe generous. It's not a stinker.
Oh,
and I'm sure a lot of people would get great enjoyment from the fun stuff that does happen in the film.
If anything, it is fun.
I caught myself chuckling a few times.
Yeah. Fun movies don't have to be perfect. Fun movies don't have to be technical masterpieces. Fun movies don't have to have amazing creature designs. They just have to be shockingly fun. And for the most part is. So in that it is a success. And in that's kind of, if you're looking for something fun, that's kind of things you've seen before, but you don't want to watch those things you've seen before, you could do worse than Split Second. You could do better, but you could do way worse. So yeah. So on that note, we'll take a break and we'll play a preview for the next Culture Cast of Rutger Hauer Month.
Why would you want to kill yourself? Maybe I like the idea of choosing when I die instead of having somebody else choose for me. If someone offered you a good job, would you be interested? What kind of job are you talking about? We need someone to help us with our hunts out in the wilderness.
Are you sure about this one?
Oh, I'm sure.
Has he got courage? Gentlemen, I would like you to meet our new hunting guide, Mason. Here's a toast to the hunters and a prayer for the hunted. The hunt begins now.
Just let me get the dog for you.
Go. We're not really gonna hunt him, are we?
He's nothing. He's less than nothing.
Come on, Mason! I won't take any part in this.
I want you!
Think. If you make it to civilization, you live. If you don't, maybe God will have mercy. I think he's gone back to the cabin.
None of them has ever done that before. It's Mr. Mason.
What's that smell?
Everybody out of the cabin!
I like my meat rare.
Try well done, bitch.
Jack Mason knows he's going to die someday.
Damn, I wish I'd never started smoking.
But today, he's not in the mood.
This is where it gets interesting.
Never underestimate
Come on, Mason!
a man who has nothing to lose. Rutger Hauer, Charles Dutton, Gary Busey, F. Murray Abraham, William McNamara, and Ice-T. Surviving the Game.
Bang!
Directed by Ernest Dickerson.
So in the second to last Culture Cast of the month, we're going to be looking at Surviving the Game, a Rutger Hauer movie about, I think it's the most dangerous game, I want to say. Sounds like it.
Looks like it from the poster image.
Yeah.
I need to watch that one. I need to catch up on
the
those other
Zodiac
ones.
Killer is a fan of that movie, I bet. Yeah. Did they
You
catch him
watched
yet
it in
this
his
year?
Trailer.
Have they caught the Zodiac Killer this year yet?
Oh, that last one was a
Boy. Yeah, I always remember that you and I have commiserated because we are serial checkers of the Zodiac Killer website. Someday they'll catch him, but not today. So
starting to lose hope.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Plenty of people have died since the Zodiac Killer went cold again. So, maybe we'll just be part of that handful of people that are serially disappointed when we die that it never got solved.
Yeah, that'll be my last words on my deathbed. Did they ever find out who killed
Arthur Lee Allen? God. Oh, so until then, Mr. Begley, where can people find you? What's going on over at the Wake Up Heavy podcast?
Well, recently you and Mike White joined me to talk about one of my favorite films of all time. And I think I can say the same for both of you. The Silence of the Lambs, that is up and available at wakeupheavy.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
You know what? And that's a movie that doesn't have a romantic lead. I wanted to mention that earlier because you said your movies don't always have to have romance in them. Silence of the Lambs doesn't, and it works. This movie didn't need Kim Cattrall, and it would have worked just fine. She wouldn't have gotten a paycheck. That's the only unfortunate part. Because that I was thinking that earlier. I was like, can we bring up Silence of the Lambs again? Just bring it up every time we talk about movies. This one much better movie that you've probably heard us talking about, over and over again. Yeah, as for me, cstachiw.com, cstachiw.com. That's my link tree. Go there for all the things that I work on, which are various and varied in what they are. Movies, weird shit, TV shows about 80s and 70s cops for whatever reason. I really love cop shows, apparently. God. And Rankin and Bass, which we also kind of mentioned here. So you can find all that and more at cstachiw.com. As for this show, culturecast.com, patreon.com/culturecast. Things you can do to support the show monetarily are appreciated, but listens are much more important. So smash that like button, rate and review on iTunes, all that.
Hit subscribe.
Yeah, all right. Man count in the morning. Wow. Yeah, just do the stuff that you feel like you want to do because I am giving you content that you like to listen to. And if you don't, cool. And if you do, great. Whatever.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah, whatever. Pretty laissez-faire around here. Yeah.
It's too short to worry about that shit.
And Mark, thank you for joining me. It was fun. It's always good to talk.
Thanks for having me once again.
Yeah. And we'll catch you on the next episode.